Morena, everybody. My name is Daniel Albert, and I am a past member of Tawa Squash Club. And I've been very fortunate to be asked to officiate the blessing of our new court, and it's been a long time coming, so thank you all for coming this morning. The protocols for this morning's blessing, they shouldn't take too long, but I do ask that during the blessing that we do not partake in any food or water or cup of teas during the blessing. Photos are fine, but if we could just please refrain from taking videos. Apai? Very good. Well, welcome this morning to our blessing. This is not your official welcome, I'm just warming up for Peter.
Patata kina mai no, pachirangi, te ai o, te ai o, te ai o, Turki panne ke ira te mauri. Te mauri ora, te mauri tū, te mauri pai. Ki runga ki tēnei whare, ki runga ki tēnei papa. Te tūturu o ki te whakamaua kia tīna. Haungi e, ui e, tai ki e.
Ahoe anō e rere tonu ana ngā mihi ki a koutou katoa ko pai nei. Kia ora tātou katoa, ngā mema o tēnei krapu. E ngā mema o mua, e ngā mema o nāia nei a muhu anoa nei. Tēnā koutou kia ora tātou katoa. Kua hua ki te whare. Kua hua ki tō tātou kōti hō. Nō reira, kia tau ngā mana ki te ngā te wāhingaro ki runga ki ngā kai whao i tēnei whare. Ki runga hoki ki ngā kai pukohi pūtea o tēnei whare. Kia tau I hora ngā mana ki te ngā te wāhingaro ki runga ki a tātou katoa kua pai nei tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa. Ladies and gentlemen, that completes our blessing this morning. But first, I just wanted to give you a brief explanation as to the importance of the blessing and the incantations that took place this morning. The importance of blessing a new ground is so that people feel safe. Those who are utilising the facilities feel safe and that they feel welcome to our court. This has taken a very long time for us to get to this place today, and so I acknowledge the builders, I acknowledge the facility managers, I also acknowledge those who gave donations to this court to make this day happen. Thank you very much. But also the importance of the blessing this morning is to also ensure that those who play on this court and also our children, our tamariki, feel that this is their home. So we've opened today for our tamariki, for our mokopuna, also for you who have all gathered here today. Obviously this is not the entire club, but I'm glad that we have witnesses this morning of today's blessing and today's opening. Before I hand over to Peter, I'm going to get us to sing a song. And Peter said he's very good at karaoke, so I'm going to get him to stand next to me. Come over here, Peter. Tu tira mai ngā iwi, tātou tātou e. Tu tira mai ngā iwi, tātou tātou e. Whai a te ngāramatanga, me te aroha e ngā iwi, ki a taputahi, ki a kotahina. Tātou tātou e, tātou tātou e. He over here. Now we have smiles. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Daniel. I'd like to think that the grounding you got as a junior here has helped you grow into a fine young man. Well done. A little bit of pressure with no notes. I think I'll buck that trend, and I just might use a couple of reminders as I go along. So good morning and welcome to Tawa Squash Club for the opening of the Morrison Kent Court 4. A special thanks to Morrison Kent for a 3-year contribution to sponsor the court and keep us in good stead. So well done, Daniel, thank you so much. I would like to welcome in particular Greg O'Connor, our local MP, coming down this morning. Sure. Dame Susan DeVoy from Squash New Zealand, thank you so much. And Anne Smith from Squash Wellington for coming and supporting us here this morning. And having a look around on a Sunday morning, who would have thought it would have all looked so good. I can hear Richie saying I always look stoned. But Richie, I know you do, but some of us do struggle a little. And what would it be without a mention of Richie? So that's, the good news is that's the end of that. Anyway, for those who aren't aware, my name is Peter Bowers, and I have been the club manager here for the last decade or more. Just a couple of housekeeping requirements in case of an earthquake, and we are pretty safe here. The club was 90% of the code, building code. What Geordie's done here would probably make this 100% plus, so if there is an earthquake, drop and cover. You can't hold on to anything, there are no desks or anything. If there is a lesser emergency and we need to evacuate, if you'd like to go out the door here or the exit here and congregate at the bus stop down the road. Now I know there is a lack of bus drivers at the moment, but should a bus come along, please don't board it because we will still need to do a head count at the end. And if you have a lesser emergency or feel a lesser emergency coming on, we've got toilets down here and they're also through the lounge in the back corner at the top. So when I opened, I did say welcome and welcome to a few of you, and that wasn't just a token gesture. This is genuine, and the people that have been invited here today are the contributors of the funding, from the trusts to the donors, the people who have contributed time and effort, especially Geordie, who has got a bit of a problem with his invoicing system, because I've got a feeling that some of the time he spent here, he didn't pass on to his invoice lady to claim back. So I understand what you've done, Woody, and it's awesome. Thank you so much. Also to the trusts, and we have representatives here of most of the trusts. Without your contribution, this probably wouldn't have got off the ground. Over half of the money was gifted, and all you guys have wanted is a little bit of recognition. That's all. And you probably won't see a lot of return immediately, but what you've done and what you've helped us do has put squash in good stead for the next generation. And I think you'll find that over the next period of time, we will now be able to grow and make this even more of a family environment for the community. Why don't you use notes? Did you just memorize the whole lot? Right, today's events have included the blessing, as you've witnessed. We'll then hear from our current president, Anthony Bowe. We'll say a few words. Now then we've got Mike Slate, a former president of the club and a life member, and Stu Davenport will say a few words at the end. We will then cut the ribbon with Liz Sutton and Kim Breve, and then have 3 exhibition games. The first one was from the raffle one last night. The second one is from a couple of our previous juniors, Jessie Rose and Ellen Berry, Jessie Rose Thomas and Ellen Berry. And then we have an exhibition match with Stu Davenport and our own Smithy, Andrew Smith. So I will now invite Anthony Bowe down to speak. Anthony, as I said, is our current president. He's putting a lot of time into the development of squash in the juniors and also in the seniors. He's also still getting coaching. Can you believe that? The era. And he's at that era, ladies and gentlemen, that you really ought to be listening to your body, because that determines, it's not the mind, it's the body, determines how much effort you should be putting in. So, without any more ado, Anthony.
So, I now have to follow Daniel and Pete. So, I apologise. I've got notes as well. And the reason I'm getting coaching is I still trying to beat Geordie. He's almost 65, I'm only 53, but I've got dodgy years. So, here we go. Anyway, Mike, yeah, there, thank you, my help. So I didn't actually want to be president. I sort of got told I was going to be, so here I am. And part of that is having to do a speech. I still have notes, but I'm going to try not to use them. But I'm going to have them anyway. But so when I was downstairs this morning, and then I came upstairs, and I was watching everyone and how you all intermingled, and it sort of reminded me of why Tawa Squash Club has always been renowned for being a family-friendly, welcoming club. Okay? We always have been, ever since I joined, and Marty Finnan, where are you? He got me into the club. Classic example. I was just giving him a game one day, and he said, I said, I'm going to join a club. He goes, and I went, I'm going to join Kandala. And he said, no, you're not. So here I am. Yeah. So I suppose one of the reasons why we, going back to the family-friendly, welcoming club, and the values and the culture that we create, what's that done is it's meant that we've consistently had a very strong membership base. Now the only downside with having a 300 plus membership on a 3-court complex is capacity. Okay? So we've all heard the stories of people having to get up at midnight or staying up to midnight. Where's Tim? He went to sleep, so always on there. We can never get a court, especially around peak times. So the only solution to solving that capacity issue was to build more courts. Now I don't know how long it's been talked about that we need another court, but when I did my first tour of duty on the committee back in 2012, I was put onto a subcommittee and we were given the task of creating a plan to solve the capacity issue. And what we came up with was a super complex. It was massive, bigger than Ben-Hur. And that involved 2 courts, a sauna, which I still want, a kitchen, Nicola, where are you? I understand. Yeah, so a mega complex. But obviously that never got off the ground. And apart from cost, one of the main reasons that never got off the ground was there was no one really that stood up to take that project forward. Okay? So no one really stood up and said, we can take it by the scruff of the neck and make it work. So the difference between then and now is we actually had the people with the skills, the experience, but most importantly, the passion to take it by the scruff of the neck and make it work. Take the 4th court from just being a dream and making it reality. So, but that can't happen by itself. So to create the 4th court and make it reality requires a team effort. And that team's involved the likes of Pete, our club manager, has done an amazing job. Okay? Everyone involved on the 4th court subcommittee, I needed water. Everyone involved in the 4th court subcommittee, those who did the consents at the very start, those who went out and got the grants, the sponsors, the people that gave us money, and there's numerous other volunteers that have helped. There's so many people, we can't name them all, but everyone's contributed in their own way. Now I mentioned sponsors before, but sponsors have always been, I've always been impressed with our sponsors and how committed they are, okay? How generous and supportive our sponsors are. And it's been especially evident now when all the sponsors in their own unique way have contributed to the success of the 4th court. Yeah, so, yeah, but then, so there's the whole group of people that we've talked about. But I'm sure that you'll agree with me that there's been one driving force. And Brian's just alluded to it. Yeah. So the reason, and that driving force is Geordie and Kimberley. Yeah. Is there any whiskey in there? Yeah, if it wasn't for Geordie and Kim Grieve, we wouldn't be standing here today. You're involved too, Kim. You're a team. And I know Geordie's done a lot of the work, but Kim, you're behind him supporting. So, Geordie and Kim, you've given Tawa Squash the platform that's going to enable us to grow. Okay? That's going to make Tawa Squash the envy of all. And also, you're going to make us the envy of all of New Zealand. Okay? And it's, yeah, so, and I know you guys didn't set out to create a legacy, but you have. Okay. So yeah, you've created a legacy for yourself, and that's through your hard work. Okay. Pete mentioned it. You know, you guys spent hours here and here. You know, you designed the court. You.
Don't look at him.
Thank you. Yeah. But they designed the court. They were involved in the consent process. Geordie spent numerous hours down here on the weekends. Probably Kim kicked them out because he got annoyed with them. But he probably didn't invoice them. So that you have created a legacy for yourselves, okay? And we are all we're all grateful. So on behalf of the current, but also the future members of Tawa Squash, we thank you.
Thanks, Bowie. Well done. We'll move on to our next speaker, Mike Slate. Now, Mike was instrumental in rescuing Tawa Squash at the turn of the century from extinction, I believe. He rolled his sleeves up when things were pretty dire, and he'll probably allude to that. He won't, because of his humbleness, mention his contribution there, but it was significant. He was also on Squash Wellington's board and did a lot of good work there, but my first recollection of Mike was my very first tournament here. I believe it was the club champs on a Friday night. Mike probably can't remember because he did this probably with all new people. But I learned a few protocols in squash and also his dedication to hydration. And we had a game on court 3 and I lost 3-0, but the last game was 9-7 and I went pretty well. I think if I'd snuck that one, I probably would have won. But it wasn't to be, and we came up, and of course, the winner buys the first drink. So I've learned something already about squash tournaments. So Mike bought me a beer, which was very nice of him. And Dad always said to me, he instilled in me, you know, son, do the right thing, so I bought him one back. So that was great, but then 2 other guys came who were acquaintances of Mike's who I don't know to this day. Came over with 4 pints and sat down with us, and I thought, oh, lovely. And then the other one came down with 4 pints, so now I was 4 pints deep, and I had my second round game at 11 o'clock that night. So I get down on the court 3 at 11 o'clock at night, and I felt like a butterfly. I was floating. I was all over the place. The poor guy has never seen shots like it. I still recall running to the back of the court, leaping in mid-air and doing a backhand drop that died in the front corner. In his first tournament. I've never done it since. And guess what? We finished the game, I won, and I had to buy him the first beer. Good news is my third round game was the next day. So Mike, your dedication to hydration and teaching new members new tricks, I appreciate that. I've continued in this sort of vein, but I'd like to welcome you down to say a few words. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Peter, and good morning, everyone. Peter, I'm glad you learned the importance of hydration, and you've practiced it ever since that first day. And I'm a person that lives by example, so I still continue to support you in that regard. There's something you may know. I've been asked to say a few words about the history of the club, and I was working out why I was asked to talk about it. And as I look around, I realise I'm probably one of the oldest bastards still here. But the other thing about history is that I hate it at school. I'm of the age that I can hardly remember what happened yesterday, let alone 50 years ago. I have trouble seeing, so I bought some notes which are a little bit bigger than the previous speakers. It's on A3, but I had to cut it down. Righto. Now, I hope I don't bore the shit out of you. If you do and you start closing your eyes, I'll stop. Because history is something that not everyone likes. But I think the history of this club is pretty precious to many of us, and I'm pretty passionate about it. So I'm sorry, I hope I don't go on too much. But today is a momentous day in the history of this club. The opening of the Morrison Kent 4th Court Grass Bank is a historic day in our history. As mentioned by Anthony, it was talked about a while ago, but it hasn't taken that long to come to fruition. Yeah, 20 years. It was in the early 2000s we started talking about it, as Anthony mentioned. About 10 years later, we started putting a plan together, and it was a bit optimistic, around $1 million. Back and come to sense, maybe they more sense than some of us predecessors. And we've now got today this great complex. So I'll talk a bit about the history of the club. It's easy to get caught up in the here and now, and we think about what we're doing today and will we survive to the future, and maybe think a bit about that. But we don't often stop and look back at what where we've come from, where we've got to, and how we got there, and what have we achieved along the way. So I'm going to go and reminisce a little bit about some of that. First question, who knows when the squash club will open? I'll tell you, why do you think about it? If you went to the 50th anniversary,
65.
50th anniversary was 5 years ago. That's right. 67. Very, very close. So it was a 2-court complex. The membership was 70 people. What are we up now, Pete? What are you on? What are we up to now? Anyone know?
300.
350 from 70. And back in those days, a pound, shillings and pence only cost you £5 to join. Now, there was obviously a big demand for squash in Tawa, because only 7 years later, they had on another court, the 3rd court, they put that whole big lounge room out the back. It was only 7 years later in '74, and that was one of the biggest developments that happened. 2006, there was a big relocation of the bar from down this end down to the far end. We had the bar, the kitchen, and everything redone up. Added 2 toilets upstairs. What a major difference that made. Can you imagine trying to get a social event, or even people would come along from outside and have to go to sticky toilets downstairs to go to the change rooms downstairs to go to the toilet? Not good. But when we got those 2 upstairs, what a massive difference that made. We also added, as you know, the deck outside, which was originally a deck, then it became a covered deck, an enclosed deck, great barbecue area. And now, of course, the icing on the cake, our 4th court. Fantastic. 55 years, what a transformation from a 2-court complex to what we've got now. What was the environment over the time that we did all that? Well, we were succeeding reasonably well to be able to do all this. But what about other clubs in the region? Not so good, some of them. We've seen the demise of Scottish Harriers, Wellington Collegians, Northern Squash Club, Maidstone's merged with Upper, Carlton's gone, Waikanai's gone, Fraser Park's merged with Mitchell Park, and previously the 2 clubs had 8 courts, now they've got 6. So while we're going on a growth spurt, there's been a net reduction of about 16 courts in the Wellington region over that period of time. So we've bucked the trend, and to my knowledge, I think we're the first squash club in Wellington to add a court in 40 years or so. Not bad, eh? But life hasn't always been rosy for us either, as Pete mentioned. We had some pretty trying times when we were trying to pay the power and the light and the bills. We were applying for grants money, and that was our first introduction to the importance of grants. We get some grants money to do some coaching of juniors, and I thought, well, I was a president at the time and an accountant, and I thought we've got to explain how we spent this money and do a return. But I was using it to pay the power, I was using it to pay the PD. As a good conscientious accountant, I was thinking, so I got a grant from somewhere else. And that gave me the money to do what I had to do to playing the previous club. Not suggesting. I had some sleepless nights and I had to go to the bar more often than I would otherwise. Okay, let's talk about some of the things that have contributed to this club. First of all, as been mentioned, the family environment is what this club's about. It's friendly and family, and so many people say that. I remember getting a phone call from AMI Insurance at Tawa, what are they ringing about? They said, can we come down and look at the club? I said, yeah, sure. So we came down, they had a look around, they talked, met some members, had a chat. Within an hour and a quarter, they were finished. Signed a 3-year sponsorship deal. And I said, that was quick. They said, we've been looking for a club that has family values for a long time. And we found it. We weren't going to spend our money until we did. And you guys are up. So that was pretty good recognition. We've kept a small club culture. We haven't tried to get too big too fast. That's not fast. It took 20 years to get this. I think one of the good points of this club is strong leadership. Now, we've been prepared to make recommendations that sometimes may be contentious to other clubs. For example, we introduced a building levy. Building levy, most clubs, members don't care about the club, they think about themselves, extra cost. Over that, they'll vote against it. Not this club. People recognise the importance of a building levy. You know that that was introduced in 2010. It's contributed almost $95,000 extra in GST, of which $60,000 roughly has gone towards this. So our members understood, but we made a bit of a contentious recommendation. We've been prepared to be innovative and take risks. I think we're one of the first clubs to move from the annual, you've got to pay once a year hefty fee, to a direct debit AP monthly fee. Now I can tell you when we did that, our membership boomed. People would come in to have a chat, just have a look around the club. Before they knew it, they walked out, they remember. They hadn't paid a bloody thing. They thought, this is good, you can come down and play. They haven't paid anything. I said, do you take that AP into your bank though? I talked about the grants and the importance of that. We learned of that out of necessity. But as you may or may not know, about $200,000 we've got for grants for this court. And aside from that, since 2015, we've got almost $60,000 in grants just for the buildings and technology alone. Not all of the other activity and stuff. 60k for grants plus 200 for this. So well done to the people and the team that have done that funding. It's a massive contribution to get us from where we've been to where we are. Another contentious recommendation, and some of you here will remember, we talked about getting a paid club manager. Afford to survive now. Who's going to spend money on paying a bloody club manager? Well, it's one of those decisions that was risky, it paid off. And we got a club manager initially for about 10 hours a week, and now it's full time, 40 hours a week. Although people keep reminding me that I do 70 bloody 5. I think we've only squashed club in Wellington with a full-time paid manager. And some of the things we've done, it's maybe surprising or not, but other clubs haven't seemed to follow. And maybe they could have learned a thing or two. The other key thing about the club is we're early adopters of technology. We're the second squash club in Wellington to introduce electronic access court lighting, which was to get in the door and turn on lights automatically. It was a little card tag system at the time, and that was the second club one. We've since upgraded that only a couple of months ago, I think, to a much more modern facility. We were the first squash club in Wellington to introduce digital scoring. One of the first clubs to introduce the capability to broadcast our games through the lounge room and then onto Facebook and YouTube. We've got CCTV cameras all throughout the place, constantly monitoring our facilities, and we've probably got more TVs than any other squash club around. Another key point of our club is I reckon our steady and dedicated volunteer base. Many hands make light work, and despite having a paid club manager, which everyone at the time thought all our volunteers will go away, they're not getting paid. It didn't turn out that way because of the loyalty of our people. So our volunteers has been strong. At times people think too much for some people, but overall compared to other clubs, the volunteers have stuck with us and done a great job. And our membership is loyal and trusting. They trust their leaders That's why we've been able to make some of the decisions we have. As I said, they haven't tried to buck what they're trying to do. Finding evidence of our club's success. So it's not just what I think or what we think about how we're doing. We're recognised as one of the most progressive clubs in Wellington. We're consistently the largest club by membership numbers in Wellington. But our success, I guess, is proven through the club awards that we've received. 1998 Squash New Zealand runner-up Squash Club of the Year. 2017 Squash New Zealand finalist Squash Club of the Year. 2017 Squash Wellington winner Wellington Squash Club of the Year. 2018 Squash Wellington again winner Squash Club of the Year. In 2018 Sport Wellington, this is not just squash, winner of the Wellington Regional Sports Club of the Year. And again in 2018 Squash New Zealand winner Squash Club of the Year. That's not too bloody bad, is it? Now, I'm sorry it's taken a bit of time to cover all the history, and I don't want to take up any more of your time. The reason it took so long is because we've been so bloody successful. Not my fault. Finally, on behalf of all the club members, I'd like to say a big thank you, firstly to everyone who's been associated with getting this court up into the final stages, and secondly, to all the committee and volunteers, committee members and volunteers, past and present, who have made all the hard work and put in the good effort to make this Tawa Squash Club the best club in New Zealand.
Thank you, Mike. Good insight into where we've come from. And one thing I did omit to do, and I do apologise, is to welcome and thank our life members, and I do feel a bit guilty about doing that as a life member myself, so welcome me, but welcome. And Michael Honeyfeel, fantastic to see you. You may see his name on the honours board. I alluded before to Michael that he almost put us under with the amount of gold leaf lettering that we had to put up on the honours board, because you must be about 15 to 20 years in a row. Hugh Honeyfield is the secretary manager, and no doubt had significant input into the growth of the club initially, and I know that he did. He was talking before about when they were putting court 3 on, and the difficulties they went through. They'd got it set up, then the first builder said no, he pulled out, and they had to get another builder. So I think with Geordie's helm, we had a much easier ride than what you did, Michael. But lovely to see you here. Where are we now? We're going to and I'd also like to thank Nicola and your band of friends and volunteers for putting on the morning tea this morning. I know it's a big job, you've done a fantastic job, and with all the decorations and things, so big hand for Nicola and the team. Our final speaker is Stu Davenport. Some of you won't have ever seen him play. He was a dynamic player in his day in the 1980s, represented New Zealand with a lot of pride, an absolute character of the game. He rose to number 3 in the world. And you think, you've got number 3 in the world coming back to play the New Zealand Open, and he wasn't even the top seed. Because I think you had somebody in your way which you probably would have possibly thought it might have been nice if he was in another era. So one of the reasons I'm pleased that you were here is we also had him here for the Jubilee when we had it at the Porirua Club. And his final comment was that Tawa's been talking about a new club for about 20 years. So your turn. You can come back. Go for it. Thanks.
I have to say, when I left Wellington this morning, I wasn't even vaguely concerned about the prospect of an earthquake. And now I'm terrified. And forget about the earthquake, I've just heard that there's going to be no buses to get back into town, and we're all going to be stuck in Tawa forever. First started coming up to Tawa to play squash with a guy called Mark Smith, who probably a lot of you don't remember, in the early 80s. And in those days, there was lots of talk about an extra court. You had capacity problems then, and yeah, 35, 40 years, you finally got it. What a milestone. You know, everyone said everything about Tawa. You've always been the most active club in New Zealand, and I'm involved a little bit in squash when people are doing a lot of talking about squash, where it's going to grow, how you're going to grow it, and all the strategic plans, and year after year they've been put forward. But I think we know from the example of Tawa that it happens with people in clubs who do stuff. And it's as simple as that. You guys have always been out there doing stuff. It's a wonderful court, a wonderful facility. I'm sitting here thinking of all the kids over the next 20, 30 years who are going to have their first taste of squash on this wonderful court. Congratulations to you all. It is a wonderful milestone, and it's fantastic to see. Thanks.
Right, so now we're coming to the stage where we will open the court. We have a couple of ladies who are going to do the honour, and I'd like to invite them up. Firstly, Kim Grieve. Kim is the wife of Geordie, who was the builder who built the building. And she's also had a lot to do with the club over the years. She's drawn plans, as you're able to do at the time. She orchestrated the initial plans, the concept plans that we sent to council to get to get consent for extra land, and that was at no cost, no charge at all. And normally a set of plans like that probably cost you up towards $10,000. So it's got a lot. So we've asked Kim to come along, and also Liz Sutton. Now, come on down, Liz. Liz's dad was Mervyn Kemp, the Mayor of Tawa, and the very first mention of a squash club, some gentlemen went along to see Mervyn and say, we want to build a squash club, will you help us? He said, I'll give you the land, you build the building. And that was the very start. Mervyn actually hit the first ball on the squash club here before the first game was played. Also, Liz's husband, Graham, was an active member here, as was Liz, back in the 80s, I guess. And Graham was instrumental in building the lounge as well up there. So we thought there's quite good synergy between these two lovely ladies. So we thought we'd get them down to hold the tape. One can hold it, one can cut it. And if you just go in relatively slow motion, we'll get some lovely photos of you.
Wait. Camera's ready. Nice camera.
Well, there you have it. We've started to grow. They said build it, they will come, and look at you. You're all here. I've got a feeling you may not stay for the rest of the day. Now we're going to have 3 games on. We've got the first one that was a raffle that was drawn last night, a $20 raffle amongst members. Mary Ellen Wakefield won it. She said she never wins raffles, but she gave us a donation. She was over the moon that she'd won it. She decided that it would be lovely to get some of the D-grade ladies who never get a chance to do anything like this, and had a lovely, wonderful super chance to play the first game. So I contacted a couple of them, didn't hear back from the other one, didn't hear back from the first one. So I said, you're either busy or you're a little bit unsettled. And yes, they were. There's no way in heaven that they were going to play in front of 100 people. So, back to the drawing board. There were a couple of people who had bought a ticket and nominated Bailey and Tyler Leggett. And when I mentioned that to, and Bailey bought one too, so obviously he was pretty keen. So when I mentioned that to Mary Ellen, she said, well, that's the future of the club. Young, she said, you don't want a crusty old woman like me playing, so young and active. And so I would like to introduce you to Bailey and to Tyler Leggett. It'll just be a 15-minute hit. You're welcome to talk now. You're welcome to turn your phones on, and you can go back and eat another drink if you want.
Tree planting and
So you remember here? I'll just sing it.
Just